Number three is that ghosts not only invite us to sort of commune or enter into relations or think about our relations with the dead, but also with the living. Ghosts, again, are part of our community. Ghosts might be part of our family, and they might remind us or symbolize family bonds. They might remind us or symbolize family conflicts. But they are very much otherworldly, but in this world as well. And often when cultures have to deal with ghosts, they have to do so as a family, specifically when you're dealing with ancestral ghosts. So ghosts are not only about family that came before, but they also invite us to interact and dwell in the family that is here now. Along those lines, engaging with ghosts is what they call a form of memory work. It's something I'm very interested in because I'm interested in the way that communities remember their own history and sort of reimagine their history to fit the present and the needs of the present. And they almost and often ritualize the history to fit the present. So memory work is something I'm really interested in. And I'm also really interested in it because so many people around me as I get older are getting older themselves. And I find them, telling the same stories or talking about people who have been gone for many, many years. And I've come to realize that they're partly telling me this story because they want me to know about whatever it is they're talking about. But they're really telling it to remember it themselves, to relive it. And ghosts allow us to do this. When we commune with ghosts, when we interact with ghosts, we are remembering. We're remembering who came before, and we're remembering the time that they came from. We're remembering the culture that they came from. I used to live in Hollywood next to the Roosevelt Hotel, and there was a ghost who lived there. There's several ghosts, I'm told, that live there. I never saw any of them because I lived there. I didn't stay in the hotel, but I heard many stories about the Roosevelt Hotel, and there was a girl from the 1920s who lived there, sort of a Shirley Temple figure, and that ghost represented a real heyday for Hollywood, a time when, Hollywood represented all the hopes and dreams of America. At the time I lived there, Hollywood was a pretty sketchy place to go. People from Compton would say to me, I won't go to Hollywood, that's dangerous. And this was in the 1990s, but it represented the happy times of Hollywood, that ghost. And there's many other ghosts that represent other parts of Hollywood. That's just one example I can think of. The fifth point the authors offer up is that ghosts have agency and that they want something. So not only, do we find ourselves wanting things from the ghosts, but often they want something from us. And it might be something as simple as just to acknowledge that they're there. Or it might be something more specific, to straighten something out that got left unfinished when that ghost was on Earth. And then they also point out some ghosts just like to haunt. And I think that certainly fits our mythology as well, that's what ghosts do. So why not haunt? I'm a ghost. And along those lines, their sixth point, that ghosts are representative of unsettled relations. And so they might be, kin relations, things that happened in a family or things that happened between individuals. But I thought they'd make this point as well, that one of those unsettled relations is between us as humans and death. The death that we'll have to experience ourselves and that everyone else that we know will have to experience. And the ghost sort of reminds us that that's an unsettled relationship as well. And it sort of helps us again, remember, but also to think about that impermanence of our own life. Their seventh point, which I find fascinating, is that ghosts give us a form of unconventional representation. They allow us to think outside of classic forms of representation. And it's kind of what I was getting at earlier, which is that they kind of give us a way to talk about something that's impossible to talk about, to explain something that's impossible to explain, to interact with something that's impossible to interact. That great mystery of what's going to happen on the other side. The ghost allows us to think that way. By interacting with the ghost, we can experience and somehow put some sort of cognitive sense to something that basically can't be explained in a cognitive way. The eighth point is that the ghost's temporal mode is one of repetition. What the ghost does is it smashes time. By coming back over and over again, it smashes time, and the present and the past become the same thing at the same time. And I would also say that repetition, this is an interesting thing to think about when we talk about ritual, and the way that this repetition of ritual kind of smashes time, and it makes all time the same when you're having ritual time. Ghosts are the same way. They make the past and the present, the future, all sort of the same thing at the same time. To the ninth point, not only the smashing time, but they also seem to show up in times when the present is wavering, as the authors say. Like during a pandemic, when everything is confusing, when it seems like the past before we could back, in the old days when we didn't have pandemics. But it's also the future because we're learning about it on our phones while we sit on the toilet, right? So the ghost is showing up in that time when the present is completely confusing and wavering. Ghosts help us make sense of that time. Point number 10 is there is an invisible landscape out there. We've learned about it from shamans and priests. We've learned about it from symbols. There's this thing that's out there. It is a dimension that is really there that we interact with. And ghosts are part of that, but they're not the only part of it. There are spirits, there are gods, there's symbols, there's magic, and ghosts are one of the many factors that play into that invisible landscape. And again, it's a way for us to sort of give form to the invisible landscape. So to conclude, are there ghosts? I don't know. Have I seen a ghost? Don't think so, but maybe. It's an interesting question, but it's definitely not, I'm not the only person to ask that question. It is a universal, and it is a really, really interesting part of cultural anthropology. I hope you enjoyed this unit.